Hello, this is Greg Forster with the American Academy of Sciences and Letters, and today I'm interviewing Noël Valis of Yale University, one of our Academy members. Noel, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Could you tell us what are some underappreciated ways in which the work in your field contributes to human understanding and well-being?
Well, that's one of those large questions, right? But we only have a limited amount of time. I would I would point out two things, but first preface my remarks on what may be underappreciated um, concerning my field, which is that you really can't talk about, say, the scholarship of my field without talking about obviously the literature and the culture. They're intimately connected, but even more so, you can't understand. I think it would be difficult to understand how what we call Hispanism, which is our fancy term for studying things that have to do with Spain and Latin America and the Caribbean, and sometimes even the literature produced by Hispanics in the United States as well. You can't really understand it without going back to how it came about. And that means that you go back to Spain having discovered the New World. And I don't want to rehearse the entire history, obviously, but it is an instance of a field broadly defined, Hispanism, that actually comes out of discovery, conquest, encounters, conflicts, but also enrichments with the encounter between different cultures. And I think that's one of the things that the field that I work in can illuminate for other people, which is understanding other cultures and understanding them as entwined not only with the literature, but with the history, for example, as I just noted. And then I would say a second thing, equally important, if not more so, and probably something you could say about other fields, particularly in the humanities, which is the best scholarship will reflect some of the great work in literature and culture, in the arts and music and so on that Latin America and Spain have produced. What they illuminate is the human predicament. They illuminate human desires to transcend themselves. They illuminate human nature. And I think, if you just think about some of the great writers and figures that have come out of the Spanish language, you would start with Cervantes and the Quixote. And as soon as you say that, you already understand, what the field contributes. The best scholarship is going to illuminate these kinds of texts, the kinds of concerns that I just noted here. And beyond that, the beauty of these works. I do think that some of this is being lost with some of the various trends in scholarship. And I think it's extraordinarily important not to lose them.
C.S. Lewis said one of the great contributions of literature is that it allows us to see the world through other people's eyes. And
Yes,
what he primarily had in mind was different historical situations, but across cultures is also a way in which we can see the world through other people's
yes,
eyes. And it strikes me, while he was emphasizing seeing through the eyes of people who see things differently, you're emphasizing we also discover similarities in
yes.
that way. It puts me in
Hmm.
mind the director Ang Lee when he adapted Sense and Sensibility for the screen. He commented that when he read Jane Austen's novel with an eye toward whether he would adapt it to the screen, he said he felt like he was reading Chinese literature.
And that's a very good example. And I think, this points to, the greatest works have this universality, obviously, which means on the one hand, when you read something like a novel by Jane Austen or you read Don Quixote, um, you are entering into a world that is not your own, to connect with Eliot's comments. But at the same time, there's a kind of sense of recognition. There are things that you see that you have in common with these characters.
Yes, and having gone through a historical period where we were increasingly aware of difference, I feel like there's now a moment for increasing awareness of commonality as well. Maybe there's a
Yes.
pendulum, maybe a pendulum swings back and forth.
Yeah. Obviously I think you have to keep in mind both, differences, yes, but commonalities, absolutely. And that's something that I think we could work more on within the university system.
We certainly could stand to do more. And that might lead to my next question. What are one or two challenges that you see in your field right now for maintaining high intellectual standards?
Yeah. I suspect that my answer, and in fact, I'm pretty sure my answer will probably reflect similar concerns in other fields. Some very fine and rigorous scholarship has been produced over the past several decades, let us say, within Hispanism. And my own field is actually more specifically the literature, history, and culture of modern Spain, but I've worked in other areas as well. So, having said that, however, I think that there's a couple of trends which are concerning because I think that they could endanger the high intellectual standards to which you refer. And one is the excessive politicization of research and of teaching. And I think, if we're going to talk about research, we need also obviously to talk about teaching. There is a tendency more and more toward politicizing much of the research, and also this seeps into the teaching. I'd also say, and this is related to what I just said, that there's a tendency as well in some colleagues to elide or confuse scholarship with activism. And I think that this also can compromise the quality of research. And it puts into question what research is, right? What scholarship is, why we're doing it. And that is a larger question, obviously, that we're not going to be able to address sufficiently right now.
Right. But there is, I mean, it's not that politics is irrelevant to issues like what are the stories that define our understanding of who we are. And we've
Yeah,
been talking about how the literature creates communities. So it's
yes,
not that that's going to be irrelevant, but there's a gravitational pull towards polarized conflict that if we
yes.
don't consciously resist it, we'll just inevitably consume everything.
Yeah, and I completely agree. Politics is obviously a legitimate area of study, and politics and literature certainly. And I have done that myself with my work on the Spanish Civil War. And of course it's also historical and cultural scholarship as well. These are legitimate and very important areas of study, and great work has been done in those areas. But it's that turning everything into a kind of arena, in which you're pitting what you think is the only way to see things versus the other way, which you reject out of hand. And I think this is very reductive, and it limits our understanding of how complex these cultures and literatures are. I think we're missing something in this sense.
That's, one of the things, this is an example I like to use. One of the things Shakespeare has in mind when he writes Merchant of Venice
Hmm.
is it even possible for people of different religions to live together peacefully under a shared civil law? But that's not the only thing he cares about. And even if that's the only thing you care about, you won't really understand what that play is showing you if you don't understand the broader human aspects of these questions. If
Yeah.
you come to it simply with an agenda you want to promote.
Yeah, you already have an answer. Whereas I think literature at its best poses a lot of questions, but not necessarily all the answers.
Right, that's right. Science always wants to get straight to the answer. Uh, let me ask you one last question. In what ways do you think the general public has a good understanding of the mission of the university, and in what ways do you think public understanding of the university might fall short?
And a good question, and certainly very relevant right now. I would say that the public understands the mission of the university to the degree that universities themselves understand the mission, their own mission. So I would kind of turn it on its head a little bit, but I'll return also to your question, which is an important one. But it does seem to me that universities have sometimes they seem to be wandering away from what the mission might be. Let me give you an example of a single sentence that here at Yale was adopted that was to, broadly speaking, indicate what the mission is at Yale. And it says simply, the mission of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences is to preserve, advance, and transmit knowledge through inspiring research, teaching, and art. That seems to me a nice, precisely worded statement, or mission here. Interestingly enough, the last time I looked, it had disappeared from any website at Yale University, but it had been approved only a few short years ago. And so one has to ask, does the university even know what its mission is? Now, by saying that, can you lay out in black and white and for all eternity what the mission of the university is? No. But it should be sufficiently open and open-ended and large, it seems to me. Does the public understand that? Um, I, I'm not sure. And I think that if they don't, it is at least partly our problem that we haven't communicated this sufficiently or clearly. But again, this may also be because what the mission is of a university, of universities, is apparently not as clear to people in the current day as might be helpful for the public to understand. There was a recent poll in which the public was asked about universities and their relationship to government in particular. And one um, hopeful sign is that they do understand, the public seems to understand that universities, if they are to exist and properly function, must be independent. Um, and that is good. But I suspect that the public does not have a very good understanding of what we actually do.
I think that's likely to be true. A deficient public understanding may not be the public's fault.
Yes.
We should look within and see if we have contributed to that. What I'm thinking about as you say this is the historian George Marsden, who wrote a well-acclaimed history of the university in the United States, emphasizes that there was not a golden age in the past when the mission of the university was widely agreed upon either. There's always been much contestation about what the mission of the university is, and many constituencies that want to pull the university in their direction. But in some ways, that's testimony to the importance of what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. We just need to communicate that better, certainly. I mean, it's not the only thing that we need to do, but it does seem to me that the public often doesn't understand this. And I think it's because we haven't been able to express it. And also because, as you note, it's contested.
Right? The contestations outside the university are mirrored inside the university. But
Yeah.
then I suppose we wouldn't be academics if we all agreed on the
Yeah.
significance of what we were doing.
Yeah. Now, this may or may not have to do with this question, but I was also thinking, apart from research, of the importance of teaching, and especially teaching undergraduates. And one of the things that I think is part of university life and the experience that students should have is, especially if you're teaching, say, literature, as I do, is that that literature has to be deeply connected to life, and the conversations that you have in the classroom have to bring that out. Now, I mention this in relation to your last question because it seems to me that this is one of the things that perhaps we haven't sufficiently underlined for the public, how extraordinarily important um, understanding how literature is connected to our own lives.
We are never mere technical experts.
Yeah,
In the classroom, particularly, we
yeah,
appear as the people we are. And that's part of what makes the liberal arts exciting and important, is that it's about what it means to be human.
yes, exactly. I have to say, I learned a lot, an awful lot when I actually started teaching outside of my department. I certain irony to all of this. And I've taught in a program called Directed Studies here at Yale, which is Yale's version of the Great Books program. And it's a wonderful program. It's a small program. It's not required, unlike Columbia. So students choose to enroll in the program. And it has been an extraordinary experience for me because it really has brought home what I always thought, at least part of my role was in the classroom, which was to open these books up for the students to understand themselves better and what the world is like.
Yeah, that's what education is ultimately about. Noel,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being with us.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you.